Hey there, it's Carla, and today I wanted to talk about vulnerability. How is vulnerability truly defined from the perspective of the soul, not just from Webster's or from dictionary.com or from Wikipedia, but how is vulnerability truly defined from the perspective of the soul? When you think of the word vulnerable, you probably think of being weak, being susceptible to attack, being open, or being honest. And while it is true that vulnerability does contain all of these things, what we need to understand is that vulnerability is basically the act of saying out loud what it is that you're too embarrassed to say. Saying out loud what it is that you're scared to say, and saying out loud what it is that your ego is trying to protect you from either feeling it or protect you from letting other people know that you feel that way and therefore feeling like you're giving them their power. I want to say thank you to Matt Kahn, because I loved his YouTube video called What is the Ego? It gave me extraordinary, profound insight into this topic. And then I want to say thank you to Teal Swan. She made a video called How to Be Authentic Without Being a-hole. You can look up both of those videos. They're right on YouTube for you to check out. So when we talk about vulnerability, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking about your inner child. We're basically talking about a 5-year-old child. When we're talking about being needy, being honest, being emotional, being afraid, we're talking about that part of you that is very similar to the mind of a 5-year-old. That part of you that absorbs every single thing that you hear. Literally. This is your subconscious mind we're talking about. It absorbs every single thing that you hear, even while you're asleep. So when you fall asleep with the TV on, your subconscious mind is absorbing the TV show that's on, the commercials, the infomercials, everything. When you fall asleep to a podcast or to a YouTube video, your subconscious mind is absorbing it and believing it. So this is the part of you that we're really talking about when we're talking about vulnerability. And when we're talking about emotions and we're talking about how a certain situation affects you, vulnerability is actually saying how it is that you felt. Like if you were to get into a car accident because someone rear-ended you, instead of saying, you are a jerk, you're a selfish jerk, you didn't see me, you were on your phone, you don't care about anybody but yourself. Instead of saying that out loud or to yourself, what you really want to say to practice vulnerability is, wow, that was scary. That hurt my feelings. That made me feel invisible. That made me feel like I did not matter. I am embarrassed. I am confused. I am afraid. I feel silly. When you admit to those emotions that you just don't like saying to anybody, that is true vulnerability. What you want to understand that what happens whenever you get angry, it's a sign that one of your boundaries is being violated, and it means that your personality is becoming inflamed. Your subconscious is being violated, and so your ego has to step in and safeguard your subconscious mind, your inner child, from that attack. So, for example, I'm in customer service, somebody comes up to my register and they have this arrogant attitude and they're talking down to me and they're looking like they're in a rush or looking at their watch. They seem to be impatient. They're not saying please or thank you. And I become inflamed. I get defensive. I get like my whole body tenses up. So what's happening is my boundary is being violated. I feel like I'm being disrespected. I feel scared. I feel dumb. I feel inefficient, which is a big trigger for me, by the way. Like inefficiency, that's like the absolute worst thing someone could possibly call me. So that's like a huge trigger for me. So it's violating that boundary that I have. So my ego comes in and my ego is like, I have to protect her. I can't let her get overwhelmed. I can't let her be disrespected, and I can't let her feel small. I have to step in and I have to get bigger. I have to get bigger. So that's kind of like what your ego is saying. And your ego steps in like a bodyguard, like security for your inner child, and does what it has to do, whether it's getting defensive or it's shutting down or it's saying something sarcastic. Your ego is going to do what it has to do to protect you. And I'm so glad I realized that about the ego now, because now I can understand things so much better. It just makes so much more sense understanding that that is what the ego is trying to do. So when you see an egotistical person, you can look at them and say, oh, I see what's going on there. They're trying to protect themselves. They're trying to protect their inner child. What they really need to do is give their inner child some more attention and tell their inner child that they love them and they're going to be okay. And now that I understand that, I can be more understanding and more forgiving when I get inflamed and when my ego comes up. So I come from a Christian background, and in the Christian community, you are conditioned to hate pride, to despise pride, and to love humility and to seek humility. Even if it's a false humility, you would rather have a false humility than be proud, because, you know, pride goes before a fall. God hates pride, and it's just not fun being around prideful people. So what I found myself doing is I would find myself going around and pointing out prideful people and saying, that's pride, that's pride, that's pride. When in reality, I didn't realize that while I was pointing one finger at that other person, I was pointing 3 fingers back at myself, because I was being prideful in pointing out the pride that I saw in others, instead of being understanding and compassionate and humble and saying, oh, like they're being proud because they probably like have a reason to be proud right now. They're probably really, really good at what they're proud of, and they're probably just trying to protect themselves from being hurt because they've been hurt so many times before. Instead of looking at it that way, I was just looking at it like, this person is proud, they need to humble themselves, and God is going to humble them one day. And that was always my thing, is that I have the gift of discernment. I can discern things. I can see people's true intentions. I can see people's energy because I'm very sensitive to energy and I'm an empath. What I was doing, though, is I was taking that gift of empathy and using it as a weapon against others to make myself feel better, and not being vulnerable with myself and with my inner child, and really listening to myself and really listening to those things that triggered that pain, that embarrassment, the fear, and the confusion and the rejection. See, these are all emotions that your inner child will experience every single day, and these are the emotions that your ego does not want you to feel. You will always be tempted to abandon yourself when you start feeling this way. You will always be tempted to suppress how you're feeling because it doesn't feel good. You think you're not supposed to feel this way. You think you're always supposed to feel good. But I want to encourage you to go ahead and embrace those emotions. Go ahead and talk to your inner child. When your ego starts to rise up, you talk to your ego first. So it's kind of like you talk to the first barrier. You say to your ego, you say, hey, I know you're trying to help, and I really appreciate everything you do for me every day. Thank you for how protective you are of my subconscious mind. My inner child loves you, needs you, and depends on you. But right now, I need to hear what my inner child has to say. I just need you to stand down just for a little bit. And I need to talk to her, and I need to see what it is that she's trying to say, because I don't want to abandon her and I don't want to suppress her. So you go ahead, you say that to your ego. And once your ego calms down, you take a couple of breaths to get your ego to calm down. Those deep breaths, because you don't want any space in between your breaths. So you breathe in through your nose, breathe out through your mouth, without any spaces in between. And this gets your mind to slow down. This gets your thoughts to slow down. And this is the optimal time for you to connect with your emotional body, to connect with your inner child, and to ask your inner child how they're feeling. So I would say, after I talked to the ego and I said, thank you for that, I need you to just let me hear what she has to say. She has to tell me something. I don't want to ignore her right now. So then I say to my inner child, hey, what's going on? Is there something you want to tell me? How did that make you feel? So for the situation with me and the customer, who was being egotistical, ironically, I would say to my inner child, how did that make you feel? And then the answer would come back. That made me feel vulnerable. That made me feel inefficient. It made me feel rejected. And honestly, I just felt stupid. Like the way that he was interacting with me, it was like I didn't matter. And it was like I was a slave. It was like I was a peasant. And another trigger for a Black woman. And after she tells me all of her emotions, whether she tells me in words or she tells me in colors, or she just gives me like a mood and I feel it, then I want to ask her something else. So you always want to go deeper with your subconscious mind, because there's levels. There's always levels. So you want to just go a little bit deeper if you can. Then I'm going to ask her, so when was the last time you felt this way? I can ask her that. And when I ask her that, then I can give her some time to give me the answer. And then when she gives me the answer, I say, oh, wow, I am completely here with you right now. And then I ask her, when was the first time you felt this way? And that is going way back. The answer to that question can be so far back that you don't even have, words to describe the situation, because you were made to feel that way before the cognitive mind was developed and before you had cognitive functions. So some experiences go far back, before the age of 6, the age of 5, that you were made to feel a certain way. And when you were made to feel that way, you did not have words to express it. You just knew that you didn't like it. Some of these experiences can even go so far back that they happened in the womb, in utero. And other times, it's the trauma, your subconscious will actually take you to the trauma of being born. Apparently, and this is what I heard this from Teal, everybody remembers their birth experience. It's just that we've suppressed it and we've lodged it so far